Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of our Draft Prospects Roundtable presented by the Hockey Writers. If you thought just because the NHL Entry Draft has come and gone, you wouldn't see these four buttes together again, well, you have been mistaken, because now we got to get together. We're done predicting, trying to figure out this mess. Now we got to get together and talk about what actually happened, recap, and all that fun stuff. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of this week's discussion, just want to give you a quick reminder. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, please hit that subscribe button. We got lots of cool stuff over there these days. Surf through the channel when you're done. Click on those playlists where you can get all your team oriented news and playlists, see clips or full shows of all of our great content across the Hockey Writers platform we got going on today. As always, our draft show has our three in-house draft experts. Our leader of our draft coverage this year, Matthew Zator, Peter Baracchini, and Andrew Forbes. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good.
Hey, Craig.
Doing great, man.
All right. Yes. And before we get into our questions, our discussion, I just want a quick disclaimer and say, God, I hope everything is great for next year so we can go to Montreal so we do not have a 16-hour second day again, because man, that was pretty rough, but we made it. We're here.
Too long.
We're here. Yes. Long before that second day started, we had the Buffalo Sabres get that coveted first pick overall, and they went with defenseman Owen Power out of the University of Michigan. More on Michigan in a little bit. On our last show, we all took a turn at predicting who would get picked by the Sabres. Peter, you said they were going to take Matty Beniers, while both Matthew and Andrew went with William Eklund. So 0 for 3 on that one, but that's okay. That's all right. So were you guys surprised by that pick? And do you feel like it was a mistake, or, it's kind of hard to tell at this point? Peter, lead us off. What do you think of that Owen Power pick?
Yeah, considering it's 2021, that we were about to probably go 0-3 with how crazy everything was for rankings and everything this year. But in terms of them selecting Owen Power, 50% yes, 50% no. 50% no because of the fact that, he was the projected consensus number one based on all the rankings, and all the scouts had him based on his skill set and the showing at the World Hockey Championships probably solidified that spot. But it was a little bit surprising considering the fact that they are, as we talked about with this on the show, that they already have Rasmus Dahlin already occupying the top left-hand spots for the first pairing. So you bring Owen Power into that mix. You got great depth for both guys, but, one of them's going to be seeing more time than the other. And if you're Owen Power and or Rasmus Dahlin, you want to get that top spot. You want to be that player. So I think at some point down the line, it's going to create a bit of a line of controversy between the two and may have to ship one out. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents on the matter.
That sounds like a problem every team in the NHL wants to have right now.
Yeah.
Oh no, we have 2 really good defensemen. What are we going to do? Matthew, what do you think of the Sabres move there?
Well, I thought that Buffalo should have picked Eklund. I already said they need an exciting player to get their fan base going again. And not saying that Owen Power's not exciting. He's an exciting defenseman to watch, and I love him as a player. And of course, he should have gone first overall. He was rated as going there. I I said before, I don't think Buffalo should have picked him because, like what Peter said, it's kind of just adding more to a position you already have a star defenseman in there, and picking a guy like a forward like Eklund or Beniers. I think that they would have gone longer in the long run better. But it's not really a surprise they picked him because Power was mostly, as the draft kind of got going, it was mostly the consensus pick that Power was going to get picked. But I think Buffalo would have gone better at getting an exciting forward instead.
Okay, Andrew, what do you think? Was that, it's hard to say adding a guy like Owen Power is a mistake, but will they regret not getting one of those forwards a few years down the road?
Yeah, I think we all agree that Owen Power was the consensus number one. At the end of the day, he's a solid defenseman. Every team can use a solid defenseman. I just don't think he was the right fit for Buffalo. They did move Ristolainen, so he kind of slots into potentially filling that spot down the road. But right now, unless you're committed to a full 4 or 5 year rebuild, I think you missed out on drafting a potentially, game changing forward, especially if you're, possibly moving Eichel in the coming weeks.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of moving pieces there with Buffalo. They've got a lot of Kevin Adams got a lot of fires to put out before that thing gets righted. But it's, a forward probably makes more sense, but you can't be too surprised with them going for the defenseman because as we've seen in the last few days, elite top end defensemen come at a very high price on the free agent market and on the trade market. So you got to get in on the ground floor on these guys and develop your own. And, they may have 2 of those, and maybe they were going down the road and thinking, hey, we're not going to be able to afford Rasmus Dahlin here in a couple of years. So let's plan for the guy who's going to take over that spot right now. Who knows what the thought process was? I have given up a long time ago trying to get inside the heads of NHL GMs. So it is what it is. We'll see how that goes. I mean, Power's a terrific player. I think we all can agree on that, and I think we all can agree he's going to be a pretty darn good player if everything works out. So we'll see how that goes. And that was the first pick of a very interesting, to say the least, first round. We had a lot of players moving up and down that board. A lot of players going where we didn't exactly think they were going to wind up. Some higher, some lower. So let's take a minute and talk about who we thought were the biggest surprises of that first round, or not necessarily a player or a team, or just what stuck out the most that you didn't expect in that first round. Matthew, we'll start with you.
Biggest one was Kosa going before Wallstead to me. I mean, not saying that Kosa's a bad goaltender, but of all the stuff coming up to the draft, Wallstead was the consensus first goaltender was going to come off the board and quite high. And Detroit goes and picks Sebastian Kosa. So now I'm not saying it's a bad decision. Kosa's a ridiculously good goaltender. I think he's going to end up being one of the better guys in the future. So not saying Detroit made a bad pick, but it was just really surprising when we had Wallstead in the top 10, a lot of our rankings and a lot of other people's rankings, even saying he could have gone first overall at one point of the year. So that was my biggest surprise in that. And then Nolan Allen going to the Chicago Blackhawks in the first round. That was my second one. But the biggest one was that Kosa pick.
Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise. I mean, I think a lot of us thought that they may go Wallstead at the 6th pick that they had, especially with Detroit's long love affair and success with Swedish-born players. You would have thought they definitely would have preferred Wallstead. But, again, with those 2 guys, I don't think you can go wrong with either one of them in the long run. Andrew, what was your biggest surprise of the opening round?
Yeah, I want to go echo what Matt said. The Kosa one was a big surprise for me. I think also Dylan Guenther dropping it to 9th. That was a big grab for the Coyotes, and Coyotes fans have a lot to look forward to there. If you want to go, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Logan Mailloux going 31st overall, not just because of what transpired prior to the draft, but also because, talking to a few analysts outside of us, he's not really a first round talent outside of what happened. So I think that was a surprise, just the way that it all went down. But I would say Dylan Guenther on a good note, going 9th overall is definitely one that, look forward to it, Arizona fans, because that was a solid pickup for you guys.
Yeah, that Canadiens debacle was I think if you just look, as you mentioned, just on a talent level, it was surprising that even if any of that other off the ice stuff never happened, you're still going, why are you picking that guy there? So they doubled down on bad right there. Peter, what was your biggest surprise of Friday night before our marathon on Saturday?
Well, I about me and Fabian Lysell. I was going to say Fabian Lysell to the Boston Bruins at 21. Yeah, I thought he should have been like a top 10 pick, maybe just outside the top 10, but I'm going to go a different direction right now and give I think it's going to be a good one, but still a bit of a shocker. Wyatt Johnson to the Dallas Stars. Given the fact that, this is a player who didn't have a full OHL season or didn't benefit from one. because of the fact of COVID-19. The only games that he had were 7 at the World U18 Championship, where he put up 4 points and 7 in 7 games. And given the fact that he probably could have benefited from one, and probably could have projected as maybe an early second or late first round, I think Dallas swung for the fences on this one. Maybe try and say, hey, we have the utmost faith in him, in his upside and his potential, that if there was no pandemic-ridden season, that he would have been in the spot and we would have taken him. So I think that was a bit of a shock for me, but I think a good one in that regard.
For sure. Yeah, that one stuck out. Matthew, you mentioned my Blackhawks with their kind of head scratching pick there. Had to wait a lot longer than I originally intended for their pick, and then they announced it, and it was kind of like, what? Okay. Yeah, definitely a guy you could have gotten later, but we'll see. Not thrilled with that, but that's for another show on our platform, not this one. As you just alluded to, Peter, and as we've talked about nonstop since we started getting together on these draft rankings, this was a crazy year. It was a season within a global pandemic. That's gonna lead to some big reaches. We just kind of talked about right there. It led to some guys falling much further down that they probably should have if there was full seasons across the globe. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Who do you think was the biggest reach of the draft? And on the flip side, who got the biggest steal of the draft? One of those guys that fell much further than we thought. Andrew, we'll start with you with this one. Biggest reach, biggest steal. Who you got?
I think the biggest reach for me was at number 10, where Ottawa took Tyler Boucher. There's not many rankings out there that you'll see him as a top 10 pick. And we just talked about guys like Wallstead, obviously Fabian Lysell, who also dropped down as well. I mean, those guys are potential top 10 picks. And here you have Ottawa going with Tyler Boucher. For me, that's a huge reach. I think Ottawa's going to, if they develop him properly, maybe he turns into something. But for me, he's not a top 10 talent. In terms of the biggest grab, I think would be Dallas at 47 with Logan Stankoven. I think, just in terms of having that talented center, to get him in the second round where they did, what he's going to offer that team in a couple of years is going to really develop it nicely into a star center. So I think that's a solid pickup for the Dallas Stars.
Yeah. It's just weird how that number 10 pick went. Ottawa hires Pierre McGuire. They draft his old buddy, co-worker at NBC's son 10th. What's going on there? Make sure it's not too hard to connect the dots there. Did he play at Shattuck St. Mary? Did he go there too? That's the trifecta. So that was a reach for sure. No disrespect to Tyler Boucher. I think he's a good player, but not at number 10. Andrew, what do you think? Biggest reach and best steal of the draft? Oh, I'm sorry. We already did you, and I'm already all over the board here. Peter, everybody's looking at me like, what did I say? Peter, it's your turn.
All good. We all make mistakes, man. I think for me, the New Jersey Devils picking Chase Stillman, I had him in that 70 to 80 range, given the fact that he would probably be a great pickup in the third round. He could reach that potential as a first rounder. I just don't see it. I think that was a pretty big reach for the New Jersey Devils, given the fact that, he probably still would have been available if they selected in that area, third, fourth round. And for me, the greatest value to me was the LA Kings picking up Francesco Pinelli. Honestly, I don't know how he fell that far to 42. I think it's a bit of a shocker given the fact that he's a strong two-way playmaking center. If teams were thrown off by the fact that he got benched during the World Hockey Championships, it shouldn't be an issue because this is a kid who bounced right back and was a major force for Canada down the stretch, and showing that, things aren't going his way. He doesn't sulk about it. He goes right back and he fights hard. So LA getting a really solid top 6 two-way center in the second round, to me, I think that's a big win for them.
Yeah, LA, they are building quite the potential powerhouse out there. Rob Blake's doing a great job. That was a really good pick. That was somebody that, not to harp, but that's definitely somebody I wouldn't have minded the Blackhawks taking at that 32 pick. I'm not bitter. Matthew, who's your biggest reach and who is your biggest steal of the entire draft?
Well, that's a good segue because my biggest reach is Nolan Allen at 32. And as much as I liked him as a defenseman, watching with the under 18s, he's not a first round pick in my mind. He's a third, fourth rounder, maybe late second, but not to the extent of being a first round pick. I think what the Blackhawks are thinking that maybe he'll become, I was talking about a Duncan Keith comparison. I don't see it. I think he's more be a good defensive defenseman, maybe a good two-way guy at his peak, but I don't think he's a first-round pick. He may be a good defenseman, but they could have gotten a lot better players at 32 in my mind. For the biggest steal, I'm between two. I got Simon Robertson going to St. Louis in the third round when a lot of us had him as a first-round pick, early second, and he could be a top-line player when he gets to his peak. He's got sneaky skill, solid, well-rounded game. I think the Blues got a steal there because he's going to be a hell of a player. And my other one is Dylan Duke going to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and the Lightning get late-round picks that turn into Braden Point. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him a top-line player in the future for the Lightning because they seem to get lucky on those guys.
Yeah, they've had some good luck, and that's how you win back-to-back Stanley Cups, hitting on those late-round draft picks. And as far as I think the Josh Doan pick by the Coyotes in the second round was a bit of a reach. And I've got to see him a couple of times in person this year with the Chicago Steel. Obviously, the connection there and why it was made. I guess they figured, hey, we got 3 picks in the second round. Like we can do this one, use it for this feel good story. But I think they could have got him in the third or fourth round, and then. A name that wasn't mentioned as far as steals is Atu Ratu, the Finnish player, 52nd to the Islanders. I think that can turn out to be one of the best picks of draft. This was a guy a year ago. People were talking about being possibly the number 1 pick overall. And yes, he had a bad year, but he's a teenager playing against full-grown adults. So who knows? I think that's going to be the best pick of the draft. I think there's going to be a lot of GMs are going to regret not calling his name before number 52. So we'll give you just a quick pause here to remind you guys, if you're watching on YouTube, to hit that subscribe button and search all around our playlists. We got a lot of good shows going on. Blackhawks have their own show, so do the Sabres. I'm sure they've had a lot to talk about in last week's episode. We have all covering a bunch of teams, a bunch of different subjects. So check out those playlists, and you can be the most informed hockey fan in your social circle. Also, our audio-only versions of all of our shows are available wherever you get your favorite podcast. So be sure to follow us, the Hockey Writers, over there as well, so you don't miss any of our great shows. So back to the matter at hand. We've had an entire week to digest the entire draft here, and lots of picks to go over. So now that you've had some time to look over things, what team, as opposed to individual picks, what team do you think did the best job last weekend? Peter, we'll start with you on this one. Who gets your highest grade team-wise?
They've been doing a great job the past few seasons. I'm going to say the Carolina Hurricanes, given the fact that they traded out of the first round, with their pick was being used to select by selected by the Nashville Predators with Zachary Leroux. But the way that they analyzed and the way they valued the talent in the later rounds was absolutely phenomenal. They took Scott Morrow, Alexei Haimosalmi, and Ville Koivunen in the second round. They added Aiden Hreshek, who had some inconsistencies, but still a lot of promise in the third round. And then rounds 4, 5, and 6, they added Jackson Blake, Robert Orr, Justin Robidoux, and Bryce Montgomery, all with great players and great potential in that regard. So the fact that they did their homework, they did the scouting, they found great quality talent that could probably amount to something in the future. They just deepened their prospect pool. So that was a big win for them.
And they set the record for most timeouts in one draft too. So they had a heck of a weekend.
No more.
No more virtual drafts, please. Matthew, who's your top graded team from last weekend?
I had a few. I'm going to pick out the Columbus Blue Jackets on this one. They did a heck of a job when they had 3 first-round picks, so they should get a high grade. But again, Cole Sillinger, Carson Kuhlmans, and those two guys first. Kent Johnson was a heck of a pick where they got him at 5th overall, and he was supposed to drop, but his talent level's off the charts. So, and then getting 3 really good defensemen in Svozil, Richard, and Richard and Makarov in the later rounds was pretty good as well. And then way later getting Malatesta and Ray Savvy, which weren't supposed to go in the 5th and 7th, were the biggest. I mean, getting guys down there, you're going to get some value picks that were supposed to go higher up. So Columbus did a heck of a job throughout the draft, I think, with what they had.
For sure, they were wheeling and dealing. They added some picks, and we'll see how that works out for them in Ohio. Andrew, who did you think had the best overall draft?
I was going to go with Columbus as well, but just for argument's sake here, I'll go with the Dallas Stars. I think just Wyatt Johnson in the first round, another 2 picks in the second round, where they got Stankoven and Grushnikov. I mean, right there, you're talking about 3 high-end talents. You got Martino in the 3rd round. Just a lot of capable skill, NHL skill that they're going to really turn into something special in the next couple of years. So I think the Dallas Stars did a great job drafting this year, and look for them to be a contender within the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, the Stars were one of the 2 teams that I thought did the best were both mentioned, Carolina and Dallas. Carolina, I mean, they had 13 picks. And they didn't have a first-round pick, but they had 13 picks. They're a team that's right on the edge of becoming a serious contender. And then how do you maintain that? Well, you got to keep adding. And 13 picks means you're going to hit on some of them. The percentages are in your favor. The more guys you add, the more chances you have of developing some really good players. So just without even looking at who they pick, just the fact that they had that many gets high grades for me. And I also like the Stars. You mentioned Johnson. I like that pick. Stankoven at 47 is tremendous. I'm also a huge fan of their 5th round pick, Jack Barr. Getting Jack Barr in the 5th round, I think, is tremendous value. I couldn't believe he was still on the board at that point. He can skate at an NHL level already. He's still got some things to work on, but for a 5th rounder, that can turn out to be a real diamond in the rough there. So yes, Dallas did a really good job. I mean, if we're going to talk about teams that did good, we got to talk about the teams that, screwed up. And I'm sure there were a few of those too. I live in a city with one of those teams. So let's talk about the teams that, at the bottom of our grading boards here. Matthew, we'll let you go with the walk of shame. Who's your least team here?
I'm saying the Ottawa Senators, and after having such a great draft last year, where they got a whole bunch of great picks, like I said, nothing against Tyler Boucher, but it was a reach in the first round with the pick they had, and then going with Zach Ostapchuk. I've watched him on the Giants. He's a good player, but not a 2nd round pick in my mind. And then they reached throughout the draft too. It's like when they got down to the later on, Ben Roger going 49th. Not supposed to go there, 4th round by a lot of places. As you keep going down, there wasn't anyone that was really supposed to be drafted where they got him. So, I mean, nothing against their scouts. I mean, they probably saw stuff in there. Like we say, we grade all these teams, but they probably thought they had a great draft because they got the guys they wanted. So it's kind of hard to sit back and kind of get into their head, but just looking on paper of how we look at it, I'd say the Ottawa Senators were the lowest.
All right. Andrew, who got the lowest marks on your draft board?
Well, since Matt keeps getting inside my head here, no, I'll say the Montreal Canadiens for reasons I've already explained. I think anything past that first round was just nobody really cared about. And I honestly think that their best pick came in the 5th round with Joshua Waugh. And that's pretty telling when your best pick of the draft comes in the 5th round. So I think, Montreal after having such a great run, making headlines for all the wrong reasons and coming out in my books as one of the worst drafts that they've had.
All righty. Let's see. Peter, are we going to keep our trend of Canadian fan teams picking on other Canadian fan teams here? Who's got your lowest marks this draft season?
You're probably going to hate me for this, Greg. I'm going to say the Chicago Blackhawks.
I'm not going to hate you. I'm going to agree with you.
Mainly for the reasons that Matt said before with Nolan Allen, the pick that they gave up, or the picks that they gave up to the Columbus Blue Jackets. In addition, with Adam Boqvist, they gave up Cole Sillinger and Alexei Heimel-Salmi for Seth Jones and Nolan Allen, which was the first round pick for that they got from the Tampa Bay Lightning. So that, to me, right there, that's a big haul to give up for Seth Jones, who, I mean, bit of a risk trading and signing to that contract. To me, given that value, I would have taken the picks of Sillinger and Heimel-Salmi. But even after that, the fourth round was probably the best round for them with Del Mastro and Victor Sternberg. Del Mastro is a really mobile, two-way physical defenseman. I really liked his game, and Victor Sternberg has that energy and intensity, grit, whatever you want to call it, to his game as well. He plays with a lot of determination when he's on the ice. I think those were probably the best picks for the Chicago Blackhawks, and kind of like Andrew with Montreal, if your best picks are those in the later 4, 5, 6 rounds, it's a bit of a reach in that regard.
Yeah, well, reaching is kind of what Stan Bowman does on draft day, where he's known for that. Shocked he didn't take anybody from the USHL. He loves those undersized USHL guys for sure. Yeah, I wasn't a fan of their moves. We've talked about Nolan Allen and I have no disrespect. I think he's gonna be. I think he could be a really good stay-at-home defenseman, but you don't pick stay-at-home defenseman in the first round. You just don't. I mean, there were better options there. You mentioned the 2 4th-round picks. I do like both of those picks. I think they got value there. Colton Dock in the 2nd round. We get it. We understand it's a feel-good story. They need all the feel-good stories they can get coming out of that front office right now. But he's another guy that I think you probably could have got him around later if you waited. But you got to get the good PR, I guess. Just looking from like overall situations and not let necessarily who they picked, but I think it was a rough draft for Matt's guys up there in Vancouver, having just the one pick in the first 4 rounds. Some moves in the past kind of, and then they gave up their first round picks and to get more bad contracts. So we'll see what happens there. But I think they kind of could have had a better weekend. But we won't know any of this stuff for 2-3 years at least, but it's always fun to be try and pick it right out of the box. We've already talked a lot about the University of Michigan. They said they made history Friday night. They had 3 players from last year's team get picked in the top 5, and then you throw in Luke Hughes, who got picked 4th, who's committed to playing there next year, and then you also had Mackie Samoskevich, who's committed to playing there, that got picked 24th. So technically 5 Michigan players in the first round, 4 in the top 5. Pretty crazy. And speaking of where Samoskevich played last year, the Chicago Steel, the USHL, they had 8 players who had been part of their program at one point or the other, including Owen Power, get drafted in the NHL. So that leads me to this question for you guys, as you guys are both all you guys are up in Canada. You pay attention a lot to the CHL. Is the NCAA and USHL kind of evening that gap as far as a pipeline to the NHL, or is this more of like the circumstances of this crazy season with more guys having to change locations to get on the ice? Do you see this as a trend going forward, or is just one of those weird seasons? Andrew, what do you think about the American pipeline going on right now?
I think you nailed it, Greg. I really do think that they are starting to close the gap. I mean, we're seeing a lot more NCAA players really make a name for themselves. We're seeing the USHL. I mean, obviously you in Chicago, the Steel have been a solid pipeline over the last few seasons, really developing those players. But I do think there's a little bit of recency bias there as well. I think obviously with the OHL not going, the QMJHL, the WHL not really getting an opportunity to showcase their players. I do think we saw a little bit more reaching in the first couple rounds of the draft. We would have seen more CHL players go. But I certainly do think that they're closing the gap, and I think it's only a matter of time before we're talking about the NCAA and the USHL in the same breath that we're talking about the CHL.
All righty. Peter, what are you thinking of this trend? How's it going to play out over the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I don't want to repeat what Andrew said, but like he nailed it on the head basically. And there was a lot of different circumstances where WHL, QMJHL, well, not necessarily QMJHL, but OHL players as well. Those two leagues didn't really benefit from the length that the Q had. So seeing players like Cole Sillinger go over and play in the USHL definitely boosted his draft stock. So they had that outlet no matter what. But even going back to 2020, where there were names like Brandon Brisson, Sam Colangelo, just to name a few that were playing in the USHL, most notably for the Chicago Steel as well. They had really great seasons, and their impact and the way that they played, it really solidified their draft stock and their positioning. So, I mean, it's been a slowly progression throughout the years, and I think this year just probably was the tipping point, and I think we could see them contending along with the NCAA with some of the other big leagues in Canada.
For sure. Matthew, what's your take on this subject?
I want to focus more on the USHL. I think they are getting a lot closer to the CHL in terms of being a pipeline. You're looking at just looking towards the 2022 draft. There's a lot of big names that are playing that played in the USHL this past season, USDP. It's becoming a really elite league. And looking at the Chicago Steel, they're like the University of Michigan of the USHL. They just pump out NHL players, it seems like, and high picks. So I mean, like Luke Hughes, being, he played playing the USHL, and now he's going to play for Michigan. So Michigan just can pump out the players, and I think the Chicago Steel at the same level. And I think the USHL is definitely at that point where they can be considered a high-end league that a lot of players will go to instead if for an opportunity. So and I just want to point out that Coronado went around the time that I said. So Chicago Steel is but they sure got a lot of good players coming into the first round, and they're a heck of a franchise, that's for sure.
Yeah, we'll see if Ryan Hardy leaving to take a gig with the Leafs. The Maple Leafs keep stealing everybody from the Steel, so there's definitely a connection there. So we'll see if him heading up north makes any difference, bad or good, for the Steel. But they're definitely fun to watch. A great program. We'll see. I mean, I think a lot of guys have come, to the States to either play college or USHL, or in some cases both, maybe thinking that, hey, it might be better to serve me to be a big fish in a small pond as opposed to trying to play fourth, third line minutes, in the OHL or one of those other leagues. But now you get more of these guys coming down, all of a sudden that pond's getting pretty big, and the talent pool and the competition is raising. So it's good for everybody. It's good for hockey. It's good to have some more solid competition and pressure on the top programs to keep getting the good players there. So, as somebody who enjoys junior and college hockey, it's all good from here. Matthew, you kind of alluded into what we want to go through our final little quick trip around the table here. It's never too early to start planning. So 2022, it's only like 300 days away, the draft. We have to start our research now. I'm sure some of you guys already have. So we're gonna go quickly around, and I want you guys to give us, does Fabian Lysell or Matthew Coronado have a younger brother we need to watch for next year, or do we have some other guys? So who's your top guy heading into the 2022 draft class? Andrew, we'll start with you.
I'm going to go with Matthew Savoie. Not necessarily my top guy, but somebody definitely to keep your eyes on. I think 2022 is going to be Shane Wright's draft, but Savoie is definitely a guy you want to keep an eye on, being a solid center, again, playing in the USHL. So a lot of opportunity there for him.
All righty. Good pick right there. Peter, who should we be focusing on here this upcoming season, starting in the fall, hopefully?
I'm pretty big on him. I'm going to say Danila Yurov from Russia. Really took note of him during the U18 championship, scoring 4 goals and 11 points in 7 games. Obviously, it was Matvei Michkov's tournament, and also there's another draft prospect available, Ivan Miroshnichenko, who's also a top prospect. But I thought Europe played better than him, and I was really blown away by his creativity, his speed, his offensive instincts, and I think maybe he could be a little bit higher than him on some depth charts going forward.
All righty, definitely one to watch overseas. And Matthew finishes off here. Who's your guy heading into next year? Who do we need to watch out for?
I'm looking at I'm going to butcher his name, but Rutger McGorty, and he's just watching some video on him. He's already a highly skilled player. Did play in the U18s, didn't get any points, but he's going to be a heck of a player, probably a top 5 pick. And another guy I'm looking at is Lane Hudson. May not be first round pick, 5'6" defenseman, quite small, but he played a heck of a tournament, 5 assists in that the under 18s, and looked pretty good as a defenseman. So if you can get some bulk on him, I think he could be a pretty good defenseman to watch out for in the 2022 draft.
Oh, 5'6", Dan Bowman's going to trade up to get him. You watch. All righty, that is going to wrap up our 2021 NHL Entry Draft recap. As always, thank you to Andrew, Peter, and Matthew for taking the time out and talking draft. I'm sure we're going to be getting back together before you know it. We've already got guys to look out for, so we look forward to that. And hats off to you guys throughout this wacky season with all your rankings and getting all those profile prospects up, those prospect profiles up. Just a great job across the board. I know all our readers appreciate it. So that's going to wrap up this episode. Once again, make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel, following all of us and the Hockey Writers on Twitter and social media to stay up to date. And we will catch you guys the next time we get back together to talk about some draft picks. Thanks, everybody.